Alright, so this machine has a keyboard that's not functioning. Some of the keys on it just don't register anything. So the only part that I've skipped that I won't be showing you is all the bottom screws have been removed already, which you can remove with a standard little Phillips screwdriver. Alright, first thing, most important when you're working on these machines, unplug the battery before you do anything, and I like to just touch a power supply to the computer to ground myself before I get started. And I like to put a little magnet on the end of my screwdriver to pick up all these screws. So I'm going to start by removing the motherboard. Now one thing you're going to notice is that this computer is quite dirty and nasty. Like most of the computers that come in with some sort of spill damage on them. So since this computer has had a spill, I'm also going to do a bit of a cleaning on it, because they're going to come back in a month and say that it doesn't turn on or whatever, or it acts funny, and they're going to blame it on me for opening it up for the keyboard. So what I do with all the computers that come in for a keyboard replacement, or I even slightly suspect liquid damage, is I ultrasonically clean the motherboard in the crest over there, which I'll show you soon. Now the fan screws are slightly longer than the other screws, and there's also 3 different sizes for the 3 different holes for the fan. So just take note of that when you're taking all these screws out. Also, one thing you'll notice, I'm going to zoom out here a little bit so you can see, is I like taking my screws out in the order in which they were removed. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 for the fan. My bottom screws, my logic board screws, I don't throw them all into a little bin, because then you won't know which one goes back where. And especially once you get into more complex devices, let's say the iPhone 4 and 4S, where literally every screw you take out is a different screw. It gets to be a little bit of a mess. One thing that drives me nuts is when people will bring something in and go, "Oh, I've taken half of it apart already. Here, it's in a box. I've made it easier for you. I already did half of it." Like, no, you didn't. You just made twice as much work, because now I have to figure out where all these go. And they'll say something like, "Well, you should know where every screw goes. You're a tech, right?" I'm like, yeah, I'm a tech, which is why I take them out in the order that I remove them, so I know exactly where they go. And when I go to put the machine in storage, I typically have different magnets for the different screws for the different areas, so I know exactly which screw goes into which location. Now we're going to remove this little bracket over here, right by the video cable. This bracket is what is holding this microphone in place. So you don't want to break the microphone cable, which is common. And also, there's this DC in board for the power for the machine is routed right around the bottom of this. So I'm going to remove the DC in board cable. Oh crap, this is dusty, disgusting, and dirty. Put that aside. Okay. Now, this is the keyboard backlight, this black piece here. Now I'm going to remove the optical drive. Also, the speaker is attached right on top of the optical drive, so I'm going to take this off as well. There's another bracket right over here that the speaker screws into. And it's also for one of these bottom screws in the case. So I'm going to take this bracket out so that I can take the CD drive out. You can hear that's the liquid that got spilled into it. Now there's this bracket in the middle here that the motherboard screws into, and that this DVD drive and also part of the speaker screws into. It's held in with 2 screws. We're going to remove the bracket. So now I got this little bracket out here. Now the power button right over here is ready to be removed. It's attached to the keyboard. Also, quick hint, lots of technicians will charge twice as much to perform the exact same keyboard repair if the power button is not working, because the customer doesn't know it's just a keyboard. They think that anything can be wrong with the computer because it's not turning on. 90% of the spills are actually resolved by replacing the keyboard, which houses the power button. So a keyboard replacement that may be $100 to $200 turns into $300 or $400 onto the ambiguous idea that, we're just repairing the whole computer. We're making everything work. When in reality, the keyboard is what's keeping everything from working. So there's a little piece of tape that is routed around this speaker wire. Now, typically I would care more. You probably noticed that I'm just, beating away at it, because I don't care about this old keyboard. I'm throwing this old keyboard in the garbage, or e-waste. So I don't care if I really mess that wire up, but you should care about this if you're trying to get to, let's say, if you're trying to take out a keyboard that you plan on keeping. I don't plan on keeping this one, so I don't particularly care. Now, these two tiny screws, make sure you save them somewhere because they're different from every other screw in the computer. If you lose one of these two, you cannot steal a screw from another part of the computer and put it in there. Now we take out the backlight, which is glued down on the sides here. You don't want to rip it, because usually if you rip it, it will not work. And typically on liquid damage, this is the most disgusting part of the machine, because you combine a liquid with adhesive, and this is also the first place of the machine where dirt will fall. So if you have a dirty customer, and often they can get quite dirty, this is where you will find all. Once you have it removed on the sides, don't think you're home free in terms of being gentle with it, because it's also going to be stuck to these layers by whatever liquid that was spilled into the machine. This here is nasty. I'm going to be putting that in the ultrasonic cleaner. Also, this here is kind of nasty, and again, I'm already here, so I don't really mind making it better, since I am already inside the computer. So I'm getting the thermal paste replaced on here is the least of the concerns, but it is something that I am going to do while I'm in it. Okay, got another screw. Yuck. Heatsink with this cruddy garbage thermal paste. This is the speaker and the microphone right here. Be careful when unplugging those, because it's very easy to pull out those little prongs from the connector, and then you'll be stuck buying another microphone or speaker, or soldering the one that you have to the board. Okay, I'm going to take out the memory. Now let's move over here for a second. This is incredibly bad photography, so please forgive me. Okay, this is my ultrasonic cleaner. I'll blow this board off a little bit because it is disgusting. cleaning the thermal paste off with the Q-tip and some alcohol before I throw it in this machine. Okay, and the clunk. Off to the races. What that thing does is it creates bubbles via very high frequency transducer. The bubbles hit the motherboard and they explode, and these bubbles also make their way underneath the many chips, and it corrodes away any of the contaminants or the fluoride in the water or the crap in the Coca-Cola. It's called cavitation. It's pretty cool. And also expensive. That thing with the tray was over $600, but it's most certainly paid for itself and then some. So now I've removed about everything from the computer. And excuse the bad cinematography here. And yeah, I'm not even halfway done, or not even remotely close to halfway done. So now we have these two layers, which diffuse the light from the backlight onto the keys. And again, dirty as hell. So, yeah. I'm going to take a second to wipe my hands off. Alright, now for the fun part. These are all screws that hold the keyboard in. This keyboard is thinner than a lot of other keyboards, and the way it achieves stability while being as thin as it is by being screwed in literally throughout the entire keyboard. So I put a magnet on the end of my screwdriver and got to remove each screw individually. You may come across a couple of screws that are rusted. Be careful with them. You will need every one of these screws back. This is not like a standard PC or even like other Apples where if you're missing one screw, you can get away with it. There will be a noticeable depression in the keyboard wherever you lost the screw. And the discerning customer will notice and will bitch you out for it. Rightfully so, because you're charging money for it. So. That ultrasonic cleaner makes a beautiful sound. Now in that ultrasonic cleaner, I have a mixture of distilled water and a cleaning agent that's specially formulated for electronics and motherboards and other components so that it gets rid of the crap without taking off what I need. Don't go putting dish soap into an ultrasonic cleaner or Mr. Clean from the store. It will end very badly for you. Or cheap out on regular water versus distilled water. Because keep in mind, a lot of the things that are in water that fall onto the board that cause problems are the very things that are going to be in the water you're using if you just fill it up with tap water. Distilled water is not going to have fluoride or any of the other gunk in it that we don't want on the motherboard. I'm going to turn the motherboard around. It's been a few minutes. To the other side. I used to do this taking all the screws out in a row, but this is such a boring and mundane process that I like to give myself the limited entertainment of randomly choosing which screw I'm going to remove. This was stuck in there pretty hard by the dirt and the grease, and you can see the nasty shit on this keyboard. Let's see. So to compare this to a non-nasty keyboard, yeah, the difference doesn't show up on camera as well as I'd like it to, but yeah, skin oils are nasty. Okay, this can go away. I'm not saying I'm going to make this look brand new, but I don't have it in me to give the computer back to somebody knowing that all that shit is inside of it. So, step 1 is shaking the crap out of it. Step 2 is going to be going around it with a Q-tip and alcohol. On a machine like this, the Q-tips are fighting a losing battle. There is far more dirt than I have Q-tips. Yeah, I'll do something with the top as well. Yeah, I'm not gonna go, drive myself nuts and make sure this is spick and span and beautiful, but you do want to make sure that there isn't a bunch of garbage in between the keys, because it will affect how the keys feel when you type. There are junior technicians that will just take the old keyboard out and throw the new one back in, and it's very rare that you find somebody who complains about how it feels, because typically if they're the kind of person that lets their machine get this dirty, they're not a discerning customer. But I have met one or two that will actually notice the difference in tactile feedback on the keys. So for the last 4 years, every one of these I do, I clean out the excess dirt from inside each key. Not something you have to do, but it's just a good idea. So once I see that the large pieces of gunk are off, I move on to the next one. I'm not going to go nuts trying to get each piece of gunk off from inside each individual key. Good. But it's important that you at the very least do this. And don't just put the new keyboard in and be set. Because you will be a lot more pissed if you have to open it again to do this later than you will just cleaning it right now. Speaking of cleaning, I believe that is enough time for our motherboard in the cleaner. So I'm going to use some alcohol to displace the water on this. It's totally fine if you're using a high percentage alcohol to simply pile it on. Let it get underneath and around every chip. This alcohol does displace water. It does a good job at it. And it evaporates quickly. Does this not look nicer than the board that I showed you earlier? It's glistening with beautiful alcohol. I'm going to use the compressed air to dry it partially. Excuse the noise that the air compressor may make. And I actually let the motherboard dry off in the air filter. Back to this. You should, if you're using standard water or something else to clean your board, or you don't have a high pressurized air unit, you should probably let the thing dry out for 1 or 2 days. I'm going to put that board right back in here when I'm done, because the alcohol definitely displaced most of the water, and whatever alcohol was left on that board along with the water was most likely blown off at a 125 psi over there. And lastly, I'm drying it in the air filter. Also a note on compressed air. If you are using a compressed air unit and you want to use it at the highest pressure because you're impatient, like I am, keep the pressure away from certain pieces. For example, the keyboard clip. You don't want the keyboard clip to go flying off the board because you shot it with 125 psi. But high pressure can also be a good tool for a liquid damage board, because you will get to see which components are loose or just about to blow off, or which pads are just about to blow off. But that's saved me a couple of times on boards where I was losing my mind, where I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working when everything appeared to be there. But that'll be for another video altogether. It's up to you how far you want to go, particularly in denastifying a customer's computer. It's totally up to you as the individual, how nuts you want to go with it. Considering where this started, I'm quite contented with where I've gotten. You can also see how nasty the paper towel has gotten since I started as well. Also, I'm not gonna throw the backlight into the cleaner. That is a bad idea. But these diffuser layers, I will, because again, that is nasty. So. New keyboard. Yeah, you can see that it doesn't really sit well at all, and without all the screws in. Again, with a PC, you'll have a screw here, a screw here, a screw here, and you'll be done. You can't really get away with that with this kind of keyboard, unfortunately. So, if you thought taking the screws out was a pain in the ass, wait till this one. Now you get to put them all back in. And this is the part where it's easier to lose them, because instead of having screws that get sucked up by the magnet, you're taking the screws off. So my motherboard's pretty much dry here. I'm going to clean off whatever thermal paste I may have not cleaned off properly the first time around. I don't like leaving that stuff on the side of the chip, even though it's not actually going to affect the chip at all, since this is electrically conductive thermal paste. I don't like seeing it there. So I'm cleaning off the chip. Now the heatsink here is, you can see it's quite nasty. Filled with dust, and that thermal paste is just gross. So sometimes I use a napkin at first to get rid of that crap, because there's a lot of it. This stuff is all good maintenance. If you're just in there to replace a keyboard or to replace a hard drive on a machine where you don't have to open the whole thing, I understand. But if you have to open up the entire computer to get to whatever it is you're getting to, this is just good stuff to do. And people will notice it. They'll say, my computer used to run really hot. Now it's cool. And now it doesn't make a lot of noise. And just like people will automatically assume the worst of you because you touch their computer, people will say, the CD drive stopped working right after we replaced my keyboard, even though they haven't used their CD drive for 2 years and it was broken all along. People will notice the good things that you do as well. Don't be a pessimist. So if their computer starts running a lot colder right after you've worked on it, they will credit you with that. And it sits in their mind next time they have a problem. It's not just, let me just go to that guy because he's who I went to last time. People will go to you again because they know that you really did a good job. Okay. I don't buy the thermal paste in those little $5 syringes because they run out in less than a week. I buy them in these big tubs. Another thing there, with paste like Arctic Silver, which is the most popular, you'll notice they have Arctic Silver 5, and they'll have the ceramic. I actually prefer the ceramic for laptops, even though it runs about 1 to 3 Celsius hotter, for one reason. With the Arctic Silver, the ceramic, it lasts a little longer. Arctic Silver 5, when I used to use that, it was great stuff. It worked amazingly. But if you're running if you're running a setup that's really hot, for example, I had a 4 gigahertz overclocked Core i7 that was running 100% load for 5 or 6 hours at a time, 1 year or 2 years down the line, it stops being as effective. Whereas the ceramic is slightly less effective in my experience, but it holds over time. And in a desktop that I'm using for my personal use, it's one thing, it's kind of easy to replace every now and then, but a laptop, it's probably not going to get replaced until the next time it doesn't work. So I try to stick to the ceramic stuff for a laptop. Also, make sure you don't put too much on it. Put just enough on that it'll conduct heat to the heatsink, and not a lot more. If you put more, it'll actually wind up working as an insulator. So don't be that person that puts gobs and gobs of thermal paste when you really only need a tiny amount. So I'm being a lazy ass. I should really just get up, get the compressed air unit, and take this crap off that way. But it's late. I'm tired. I'm being a little lazy. If you're going to be lazy as a technician, be lazy where it doesn't affect the repair or it doesn't affect the customer. Now comes this speaker and the microphone, as you can see, like most of the computers. So I don't want to scratch the speaker, but all this crap around the side here needs to go. Because it will make the speaker rattle. But when you play loud music, you'll hear a little bits of distortion that's actually caused by the food and these crumbs. And again, you will be if you open the computer, trust me, you will become to blame for everything that doesn't work on it. So it's good practice to do these little pieces of maintenance while you're working on it. Also, if you use compressed air on the speaker, keep it under 25 psi so that you don't wind up destroying the thing. There's already adhesive on the bottom of this, but I still like to put another piece because it's going to fall off as I'm inserting the motherboard in. It always happens for me. It's just a pain in the ass. Double-sided tape. You don't have to do this. I just do it because it helps me curse less later on. Now you'll see on a lot of these there's typically a little screw hole of some sort and an indent in the speaker, so make sure that that lines up. That's how you know that you aligned it right. Then you plug them into the board again. Any luck, you're not half asleep like I am, so you got it right the first time. That's another thing in laptop repair. Wire routing and proper wire routing is incredibly important. Plugging the wire in is half the battle. Plugging it in so that it's not crimped by another metal screw or piece that's going to fit there where, let's say audio is going to short to ground or a power supply is not going to short to ground. Wire routing is very important. You don't want anything to be stretched where it's not supposed to be. So, now let's see what our keyboard backlight layers look like here. I believe ultrasonic cleaner 1, nasty computer 0. Yeah, this machine is a lifesaver. This looks good. So I'm just going to dry it off. And excuse the loud noise that's going to be coming from the air compressor. Yeah, it's nice and good and dry. And clean. You want to align the backlight layer properly so that the lights shoot into the keys the way they're supposed to. You'll know if you didn't if you only have light down a very tiny section of your keys. If you do, you did it wrong. I'm going to put the power button back in here. Be really nice to this button, because if you rip that cable that the button is attached to, you have to do this all over again. And the 20 or 30 or 40 bucks you spent on your keyboard, or your 150 if you bought it from a place like iFixit, whatever money you spent on this thing is a small consequence. But doing all this work again is absolutely miserable. The only thing worse than doing this once is doing it twice. So we have this in. Now, the bracket. The bracket back in. It also helps if you're not putting the bracket in upside down. which I have a hunch I'm doing right now. I sure was trying to put the thing in upside down. Now your CD player. Remember, right side up. This cable, point down. Don't crimp the speaker wire while putting the CD player in. If you do, you will have no sound. You don't want to have no sound. You like sound. It's a media computer. It's part of why you buy this thing. So, don't crimp the wire. Put the bracket back. This wire over here for this Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and webcam is going to go under this bracket. Screw the bracket in. You know, lots of laptop repair is proper wire routing. Get the speaker back in here. Okay, now putting the motherboard back in. Plug the DC board back into the motherboard. Please don't just put this in here and then plug all the top things on. Somebody used to work for me who would almost never plug the DC in board, which is this, into the board. And you know, I would have to be that nice guy who would fix your charging problem for free because you had a keyboard done here. When you know, in reality, the charging problem was caused by the fuckwit that didn't plug the DC in board in. So. If you're a technician working for somebody else, please do this so that the owner doesn't have to charm his way out of your mistakes. And if you're doing it for yourself, please do this so that you can get the money at the end of your repair and not the hassle. There are so many people that do not plug the DC in board at the end of the keyboard. It blows my mind. Okay. Now, as you're going, make sure that all of these wires are being routed properly. So the first one, the DC in board, there's a screw holder right here in the case. The DC inboard wire goes this way around the screw holder, not this way. You have the battery indicator, the battery. Now let's go to this side. Keyboard backlight, keyboard, trackpad. This is the hard drive wire, which I keep folded over. This is the optical drive wire, speaker wire, and Wi-Fi, webcam, Bluetooth. Now slide the board in, and also be nice to the microphone here. Don't forget about the microphone. So slide the board in and make sure that all of those wires are where they're supposed to be. And once all the wires are where they're supposed to be, I like to screw it down in the corners so that the wires don't wind up running under the board, as you can see them doing right now. And there's one right here that almost ran under the board. See what I'm talking about? Track that. Screw. Screw. Okay. Now they're not going to go running. I'm going to take the microphone wire here. And you don't want to just shove the microphone anywhere. Put it back in the hole that it's supposed to be in. If you don't, it's not going to sound as good. People notice. People care. You should care, especially if you're charging money for it. Screw, screw, screw. If you've done a really good job, you'll notice at the end of the repair that you have no spare parts. When you buy this keyboard, don't be mistaken, especially if you buy it from me, and there are things left over at the end. Those are not spare parts that I included just as a thank you for your business. That's crap that's supposed to be inside of your laptop that you didn't put back in your laptop. So at the end of your repair, there should be no spare parts. I'm also not scratching the board here. I'm using the side of the screwdriver to help keep this pinned down so that I can plug these cables in, because these cables can be a nightmare otherwise. Corner, and then the rest are fairly simple. Route your Wi-Fi, webcam, and Bluetooth in between the speaker and the DVD drive. Not on top of, not around, in between. Also, when dealing with the Wi-Fi, webcam, Bluetooth one, make sure you plug it in all the way. So you may have to temporarily remove this silly sticker here to push it in on each side. I'm using a Torx T6 screwdriver's head to push it in on each side. And then look under this thing and make sure that there are no pins showing or that it's not diagonal. This cable carries some power, and you'll wind up blowing a little component over here if you don't plug it in properly, and then you'll have no webcam, Wi-Fi, or Bluetooth. There's a 5 volts going up there. We want to keep the 5 volts going up there, and not let it short to ground because it was plugged in improperly. Here we got the other side speaker and subwoofer. Another dust bunny. Where the fuck did you come from? This is the video cable. Again, very important here because you don't want to blow a backlight fuse on the motherboard. Move this little cushion back. After moving the cushion back, then move this over. And I like to watch that cable the entire time it's going in, then even check again to make sure that it's not plugged in lopsided in any area. I believe it's pin 16 or 17 around there on this model, but those carry the backlight voltage for the screen, power. You don't want that shorting to ground or another pin. So the bracket is screwed in. Now the fan is left. Big screw goes over here. Medium screw goes over here. Tiny screw goes over here. Also, if you're ever having a problem inserting a screw, typically it's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Go around the left way until you hear it click. Then you'll know you're okay to start going in the right way. Instead of continuing to screw harder and harder, because then you'll wind up stripping it because you're not screwing in the grooves. Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty, go left for loose until you hear click, and then start going in. Also, notice I'm leaving the battery for last. I want to plug everything in without power going on. It's your computer and you don't care if you break it. If you don't care if you break it, if it's not yours, and you're not really accountable to anybody, then don't care. But if something else breaks on this, I have to wind up eating it, so I don't do that. Now I'm plugging it in before I close the bottom. I'm going to test it. If you don't test it before closing the bottom, it is typically bad luck and it will not work. So I'm going to boot up into safe mode and check all the keys. Or single user mode, I should say. I'm still in Windows mode here. The screen is also cracked on this computer. That's going to be work for another day, though. They don't want to fix that right now, which is totally fine. It's their computer. Alright, I'll have to go into the operating system to test the rest of the keys, which I actually can't do since I did forget to ask for that password, but I will do that tomorrow. I'm about to go home. This works. It's probably going to run considerably cooler than it did before because it's all cleaned out. It's using the better thermal paste, and look at all that dirt. Good. Hopefully you learned something here. Hopefully this helps you with fixing your own machine. And hopefully it's been helpful that I went through the entire process without speeding anything up or working on a perfect case computer where everything was, kind of... You know those videos that you see online where everything's kind of already done for the person, or they're removing the glass on the MacBook and the glass has already been removed, it barely has glue on it, they just go doink and it comes right off. It doesn't come right off. Or the backlight layer when they're replacing the keyboard has no dirt on it, it just comes off like this. That's not how it is in real life. So hopefully this video is a little bit helpful since it's working on real machines, no video production effects, and it's all being done with real life computers that are in the real life incoming pile here at the store. So yeah, these are all the machines that we got to work on. It truly never ends. But that's good. Yeah. Until next time, thank you for viewing. Good night.